going to start our panel here, even though I'm sure that a lot of people are still coming in. And you may have seen this one listed several different ways. One of them was listed as caller cooperation, another time was listed as sink or swim, and I can think of a couple other names we could give it, I guess. But we're supposed to be talking about preparation for classes and how the callers can cooperate together. By the way, I'm Harold Bausch, and I'm supposed to be your moderator today. And we have with us Jim Davis from Auburn, Washington, and Hal Tray from Baltimore, Maryland. And don't call him Harold, it's Hal. And as all good organized callers do, I set aside my papers and things before we came. As you all know, you're packing, you try to make things as compact as possible. And so I finally went through them again and took out the papers that I didn't really have to have along, laid them aside, and a pile of those that I really wanted to have along. Guess which one I brought with me? And so I have no material on these two gentlemen that I can read to you and tell about their experience, and so I'm going to ask each of them to do so when they come to the microphone, tell a little bit of their background, and we'll take it from there. I know that both of these fellows have called for a long time, and the first thing we wanted to get in this is cooperation in publicity. And since that happens to be delegated to Hal Tray, we're going to introduce Hal first. So would you welcome Hal Tray, please?
Thank you, George. Thank you, Harold, too. In regard to my part of the program, I'm sure that you're familiar with cooperation in publicity because everybody does the same thing, I think, pretty well. They get flyers out to the neighborhoods and they call people up on the phone and they get their dancers to encourage them to get their friends out to learn how to do this wonderful thing called square dancing. And the cooperation is pretty much between the caller and the dancers, and sometimes the dancers are letting the job ride on the shoulders of the caller almost altogether. It seems a little suspicious looking, as though maybe they don't want to get new people into their club anymore. They're getting a little tired of stepping back and picking them up and bringing them up to club level. And this could be a very dangerous situation, so I think it's well to keep an eye on that. The one thing that we do in the Baltimore area, we have a Square Dance Leaders of Baltimore area, so-called, which is an organization that meets about 6 times a year, and practically all the callers belong to it because it would be unthinkable not to belong to it. The dues are only $4 a year, and that includes what you get from it is the cooperation of the other callers and the fact that the class level dancers are dancing now at a dance on Saturday nights. One week it's held on one side of town, and one week it's held on the other side of town on a Saturday night. And this gives them a chance to put to practice the things that they've learned during the week at their regular class session. And the callers who call those dances are callers who have classes going, and the schedule is made up in June or July for the following season based on callers who are going to be teaching class. And they're paid for their efforts at that dance, unlike many of the others that we do for the benefit of the Heart Fund, the March of Dimes, and so on. And it has added quite a little to the Treasury so that we think we're going to have some money this year that we can put on a pretty good advertising program through the papers and through the television media, getting part of it with community service announcements, and part of it we intend to pay for so that we can have repetition in our advertising, which I understand is very important. A one-shot deal doesn't seem to do too much. So the other thing that we do is when about 2 weeks before Labor Day, on a Saturday, the Maryland State Fair, it's an agricultural fair, is held at Timonium, which is just outside of Baltimore. And the callers all get keyed up for that, and we invite prospective dancers and anybody that will come out to see the great spectacle. Now, the Maryland State Fair itself does a lot of the advertising in this, and they advertise the square dancing as a spectacle. So we have about 400 to 500 dancers come out there on a Saturday at the fair. They get in free anytime before 7:30. They're in costume, and at about 7:30 we start the dance. And it's been highly advertised, and people urged to come see this great American spectacle, the great American folk dance done by people in full costume. A lot of us don't seem to be aware of the fact that we're trying to make this the great American folk dance. We're just assuming that everybody knows it's the all-American folk dance. And so square dancing, as far as we're concerned in the Baltimore area, a lot of us just feel that who says it isn't the great American folk dance? So I do hope that you'll all write to your senators, as I did too, and try to get it approved officially. But in the meantime, I don't know anybody that's standing up and saying it isn't the American square dance. However, Saturday night comes, all these dancers are there. Great big floor, Cow Palace it's called. Good music. We had live music as well as tapes and records last year. And it brings out quite a crowd of people. It's done worlds of good for the rural areas. We're getting classes started in boondocks that never were there before, and callers going out, and it's helped an awful lot in that respect. So the way we do that, we have flyers made up which list the callers who are having classes, where they're located, when and what time they start. And as the people come in, they're handed a little slip of paper where, if they are interested, they can sign up, giving their name and address and phone number and their approximate age group, so that people can get in touch with them, and they indicate that they're interested in square dancing. Otherwise, they don't fill out the sheet. So these are turned in, and the people in that particular area that work that area get the sheets and give them a call, or they get them signed up that night. Any questions? There are people standing at the door, either callers or experienced dancers, that can give them a little cell, and they're handed a piece of literature that gives them a little cell on square dancing, advises them, of course, that it's not only a means to an end, but it's an end in itself. And the means to the end are the things that are really important. It gives them physical and mental exercise as well as social advantages. So that's about the only thing I have to offer at this point. Questions or what?
All right, Hal. You didn't tell us anything about yourself, Hal. How long have you been calling, Hal? Since 1951. You can add that up yourselves, fellas. That adds up quite a bit. And you calling mainstream plus and on?
I have plus two clubs.
Plus twos?
I have 2 classes.
2 classes?
And then one night stand.
And one night stand. So that's quite a variety.
Well, 3 nights a week, except on the Saturday nights, which sometimes I don't. Generally it's 4.
We say generally 3 to 4 nights a week. Okay. We'll, by the way, in case some of you are wondering, we are going to ask for some questions and opinions and comments after a while. So if you have a pencil and paper there, write down anything that, if one of these gentlemen mentions something that you'd like to comment on or add to or ask about, please write it down and keep track of it, and we'll have each of them back. Each of the gentlemen here are going to make the statement about this and that first, and then we'll have questions, and then we have to go on with more about uniformity and teaching and so forth and so on. Well, then that would be Jim's topic right now, uniformity and cooperation in teaching.
Okay, thank you, Harold. My name's Jim Davis, as Harold said, and I've been calling about 12 years. I live in the Seattle area. I'm calling full-time now. I call almost 30 days a month, I guess. Anyway, this, I think, is a real controversial subject as far as getting everybody to work and go along the same guidelines. And, of course, this is what CALLERLAB has been trying to do since the beginning of the organization. I feel that CALLERLAB committees have spent many hours defining movements and recommending styling standards. I'm sure that you will agree with me that a problem still exists. However, as far as seeing these concepts actually applied by all of us, full-time or hobby caller alike, since there are only about 1,300 to 1,400 CALLERLAB members versus 10,000 callers right around that area that are calling, whether full-time or part-time in the United States alone, we as members, I think, have our work really cut out for us. We need to tactfully work with other callers to convince them that uniformity in teaching, not only the basics, but any plateau of square dance movements and styling is the only way to go. We must bring them to the realization that even though some of them may have been doing things their way for 20 to 25 years, times are changing. Standardization is badly needed in the movement. I think we'll all agree on that. In developing changes in attitude, both callers and dancers, let's say, for example, you observe a caller teaching a curlicue by instructing that the gent hook 2 fingers with the lady, then is to make an arch and the lady to duck under and spin 3/4 while the gent pivots 1/4 the other way. Right, CALLERLAB, of course, recommends the ball and socket type smooth turning to do a curlicue. But we need to try to, in a way, get everybody to teach the movement the same way and to go along with the styling so we can get this uniformity in the way that we teach these movements. But it's kind of a touchy thing, because I know that I certainly wouldn't walk up to a caller if I had a class or a workshop if I observed him calling something or teaching something wrong and say publicly, you know, what are you going to do? And so this is really kind of I think, a real a job that we have, and we have to be very tactful about it, because I'm sure the CALLERLAB does not want to become a police organization. We weren't formed to be a police organization. So I say, these are questions like Harold say, and we hope that everybody will give us feedback on them. Would you stop the caller in the midst of his teaching, correct him? Well, certainly not. Or would you challenge him in private? Or would you let it pass and never bring it to his attention at all? How do we as members of CALLERLAB accomplish getting the word to callers everywhere in an attempt to hope that they will abide by the standards that have been set? I don't know about the majority of you in the room, but in the state of Washington, we have about probably 10 callers out of 175 who belong to our organization, and that's a real small percentage, well, for all the callers in our state anyway. We also have a state dancer federation that is very political and has set itself up to look out for the dancer, and they kind of, in a way, it seems, fear CALLERLAB, because I think they think that we are attempting to be a police organization, and thus we have a little bit of a resistance there, which really, I think that we need to work with all of the dancers or organizations as far as educating their officers and so forth, too, to the fact that we are all working toward the same goal for square dancing, and that's to promote square dancing and to all work together to build a movement. Let's see. Most of these organizations really don't know what CALLERLAB is about, and one of the highest ranked ones is referred to the period before CALLERLAB's existence as BC, or AD, referring to after domination by CALLERLAB. And we do not need this kind of advertisement. I think to accomplish our objective, what is needed, of course, is to re-educate the entire square dancing and caller population. We need to let them know what we are all about, reinforcing that idea that we only wish to better square dancing for all of us and help callers everywhere be able to go forth and set a standards of teaching and styling, and to all work together toward that same means. Now, I've got some ideas here that I kind of came up with, and I'm sure that many people here in the room can probably add some very other interesting ideas for us to all listen to. I feel that we can start off by setting the example ourselves. Ask yourself if you diligently follow the teaching and styling standards set down by CALLERLAB. CALLERLAB recommends styling in an ocean wave formation with palms up. Are we all teaching the palms up, or do some of us belligerently ignore that teach and teach the forearm hold instead? And I know that there are various areas in the United States, various areas that still do dance forearms and ocean waves and so forth. And I don't know, personally, I feel since the vote was taken at CALLERLAB, and even though I think it was 65% for palms up versus the other type of forearm dancing, that if we are members of this organization, that was a majority vote, that we should go back to our areas, and even if we've been doing something different, we should say, well, gang, hey, it's been changed, so here's the way we're going to do it, so we can all do it together. This is what I've noticed traveling around the country, and even from at home in my workshoppers that are exposed throughout the Seattle area, especially working with some of the tape dancers that are dancing to a lot of the Eastern callers, we still get a lot of the forearm type holds, and then you see it on the floor with half her palms up and half are like this, and it really does make quite a bucket of worms to look out at. So how can we expect the other callers to join us in styling standards when some of us do not adhere to them ourselves, and of course the people do know that we are members of CALLERLAB? Personally, I don't care whether it is arms up or arms down as far as what it's going to be, as long as that we all do it together. We should all say that this is the way we're going to do it and go ahead and do it that way. Just so we can all come up to an agreement on styling and go back home and teach our new dancers the same way. We must be united in this if we expect to have a credibility shown toward us by dancer organizations. We must show that we are organized and we all do the same thing that we are advocating to the dancers and the dancers' organizations. It has been long proven in teaching anything well, the teacher must repeat the instruction a number of times before the student will finally retain that particular concept. This is known as reinforcement in learning. Someone recently advanced the theory that a new square dancer must repeat a move approximately 87 times before the movement is second nature. Based on this precept, it has been recommended that lessons be extended to cover 40 weeks. Ideally, this would then give the caller the necessary time to repeat all the movements enough times to stress smooth dancing and moving to the beat of the music and concentrate on the vital issue of styling. Unfortunately, we still have many areas of the country who still try to squeak by with a 20-week class. Oftentimes it's a matter of revenue, and a small club is hard-pressed to pay hall rents, callers' fees, and so forth. Sometimes the caller thinks that 20 weeks worked 10 and 20 years ago, so it will work today. And of course, with all the movements we have on our basic and extended basic list, you can't really, I don't think, teach a new dancer to dance through the extended basic through number 68 into a 20-week period and be proficient at it. Perhaps we could take a poll to try to determine the average length of time callers take to teach their new students. After this has been determined, we could work toward getting everyone to accept this as a rock-bottom number, and we can't up that number every few years. In other words, we could slowly but purposely re-educate callers around the country. This way, the suggestion would not have the dramatic impact that asking them to double the length of time seems to have at present, which in a lot of areas is just not being accepted at all. I have a mainstream club up in Seattle that is going with 20 lessons, that had been going for 20 lessons for some years. And when I started to call for them, I had to really talk them to get them up to 25 weeks and then to add a 5-week workshop, which has given me 30 weeks working with these dancers. And I don't think we can do this overnight as far as getting clubs, especially ones that callers contract call for, to all of a sudden say we're going to change from 20 to a 40-week class or even a 35-week class. This is going to be a real slow process, I feel. And with the movements that we have to teach, it really presses a caller to plan his lessons. And, of course, we're not, I'm sure we all find ourselves very pressed at the end if we're working a small session like that to try to get these movements in and teach the dancers correctly. I think we need to put on a membership drive to list as many callers as we can to get into CALLERLAB. From the 9,000 plus known callers in the country, we should be able to build up our associate membership to a greater proportion than exists today. And I think we need to educate the non-members as to what we are all about before we ask them to abide by our styling and teaching recommendations. And I think another approach, kind of in conclusion here, is that we might take is to possibly sponsor clinics by CALLERLABs in different areas of the country where we have members that are members of CALLERLAB, work with local callers organizations that possibly in a lot of the smaller towns are not, do not belong to CALLERLAB or know quite what we're all about, and explain our styling and teaching methods, why we feel that this is the best way to teach dancers correctly. And I think by doing this, we might interest more people to join us, and which is going to help our job and make it a lot easier. That's all I got here.
All right, thank you, Jim. Jim had a number of points that, by the way, we're going to take right now about 10 minutes of our time for questions and comments and so forth and so on. But I do want to remind you of a couple of things he said. One of them is this, that we're in a period of change, and we certainly are. There's none of us that haven't changed our ways of teaching in the last few years as a result of guidance we've received from CALLERLAB. Just, for example, yesterday we had a conversation, I can't even say the word, conversation about a fold, definitions. And now that's getting off the subject a little bit. See, we are through the years changing. Our definition of fold would be different than what some of us old-timers used to think of it. Run would be a little bit different definition than we're used to. Flip, the word to flip into position might describe what some of us call a fold. So we're still in the process of change. We're all having to teach a little different than we did in the past. But that is, again, a little bit different. I liked one thing that Jim mentioned, and you might talk about this or think about it, and that is the contact of the CALLERLAB members here, you folks, with the callers' organizations at home, and see if you can explain to them a little bit more what CALLERLAB really is and what we're trying to do. Try to bring them with you next year. But right now I'd like to have your questions or your comments, and you can direct them to anyone you want. Just a second. I've got to repeat everything you say here. So let me just say, you say there's a conflict between you feel there's a conflict between the advance. Oh, yes. All right. His comment is that he feels that some of the challenge, not so much advanced level, but the challenge level callers are getting the dancers to put hands down very much the time when they should be having hands up. And if they are CALLERLAB members, then why are they doing this? It's a very good point, and that has already been mentioned in the CALLERLAB Board of Governors already. Not that they have the answer, but they are aware of the problem. Do any of you have any suggestions? Did you want to address that too? That's a point Jim mentioned, yes. Did anybody else have any comment on that? Any suggestions? You would say not only in the challenge callers, but the regular level callers. Yes. I'd like to ask all of you that are present, have any of you been aware of or have you seen people dancing a right and left grand other than with the handshake? Have you seen this, for example? Where did this come from? Does anybody know? Colorado. Poor Colorado, they get it in the neck. They got blamed for that the last time I mentioned that. It's the only place you've ever seen it? We've seen it a little bit in Nebraska just recently, and we're a little concerned about it. We're fairly close to Denver. In Colorado, you say they don't start in a square, they start in a circle? At a caller school. Maybe we'll have to mention this to our fellow callers from Colorado and see if we can find out what's bringing that on. Well, you just mean the circle of 8 people in a square. Would they be circling when they... Oh, I see. Well, this wouldn't be any problem, would it? Would you say just because... for example, in my area, we have them join hands to get the size of the square. Then they usually will drop the hands. But many parts of the country, I mean in our part, in the Midwest, when the music starts, if the caller doesn't start immediately, they will keep a hold of the hands and balance in and out a couple times. We always say they're getting their motors going and getting to the rhythm of the music. I see no conflict with that, but do you? I mean, do you see a problem there? It's just something unusual that you hadn't seen. I think maybe, this is what I was saying, I think they're just getting organized, getting their set squared up. Yes. Okay, he's speaking about toward caller, Reno, come up here. Caller cooperation. Just don't keep it over 2 or 3 minutes.
No, that's Walt Cole. First, are there any Canadians in the audience? Good. From Toronto area, particularly. I'd like to embark on a caller cooperation segment of conducting, say, a one new dancer class in the whole area. And maybe this is towards Hal, because he's leaning towards that a little bit. I know they do this in Toronto, and I was looking for help from the audience in obtaining this cooperation. In that, you will have a more standardized teaching. First, the caller that would conduct a new dancer class would have to leave 2 pints of blood that he would not start a club thereafter for a period of years. But to get everyone in the sense of cooperating and sending their dancers in, you'd have 1 full year of teach, 1 full year of teach, and then 1 full year of practice with invited callers in. Because which new dancer is capable of cutting mainstream even at the end of 41 weeks? The club caller has to drop, quote, the level when you bring in a new class. And we're discussing this in our area now, and I'm looking for answers.
Any of you gentlemen want to speak on it? Or should we keep it on the floor for a while? All right. I think this gentleman was first, then... Okay.
And in doing so, all the callers have to resort to going with the way CALLERLAB has laid it out. And a lot of them really didn't like it. A lot of them had a hard time working with it because they simply didn't understand it. But they had questions, they got help, and it did.
Now let me come back on that. You say the callers group got together and organized a class?
Not organized a class, the area council.
The area council. Oh, I see. I see. So I'm going to get this on the tape for you. So each caller then taught his own classes, but the organization brought them together into special dances for their level.
Right. And every single week there was a new dancer dance.
Oh, every week? Every week.
So that our new dancers got the experience they needed on the way through the program. The callers that used that program was progressive. Every week there been 1 or 2 moves added to the program that was previous. But always got 2 weeks behind where they were actually teaching.
Okay, now let me interrupt again. They would bring them in every week, but did they have different callers call each time? A different caller from the organization, from the different club sponsored? Sounds good. Sounds good. Now, how long did this go on?
This goes on. The first Indiana dance starts about December 15th, 2 weeks before Christmas. They go all the way through the end of class to the end of April, the first part of May.
Start the 1st of December and all the way through April. Okay.
The area council itself sponsors the final new dance dance year upon graduation, and all of the callers are part of the program, and it tells basically at the mainstream level with being a little ways away from the possibility.
I see. Now, where was this at again? This is in Oregon. Sounds good to me. Now, I think this gentleman was next. If you'd like to come up to the microphone, you're sure.
I find difficulties with that. One, I consider myself a private entrepreneur.
Yes.
I'm
All right. Now, wait a minute. So this gentleman has some questions about it, whether that interferes with his own private enterprise or his own private program. Now, let me ask you both a question. What is the population square dance-wise in your area in Oregon?
Let me go in reference to squares.
Yes. All right.
Our first new dancers dance that we had in the Mid-Willamette area consists of 24 clubs. We had 57 squares.
57 squares for the first one.
The last dance, we had 39 squares.
Maintained it dropped from 57 to 39 toward the end of lessons.
The major thing we did come up with as far as the benefit of the whole program was the retainment of new dancers from the beginning of class to the end of class. We added about 28% more than we ever had in the past year.
You are keeping your dancers. All right, now let me ask you, how many squares would this involve in your area? 54? 54 clubs and 100 and some squares that would attend that. All right. And now, what is your area again? Santa Clara Valley, California? Okay, now, there's probably differences in the regions there of attitudes and everything. I think we had another hand back here first. Hawaii. Yes. Yes. So the comment here, then, we have to put this on for the tape, is that he feels that where one caller is teaching for all of the clubs in the area, it is not a perfect balance for all of the clubs, that they're going to pretty well follow this one caller into his club. And I can see that. I've seen that in the past also. Okay, Bill? Would you like to come up and use the microphone? I'd like to get these things on the tape. I'd encourage all of you to come up and use the microphone, although we don't want you up here over a couple of minutes. I'm going to time him.
Take out your notebooks, please. We're going to ask questions. I'd like to comment on Marty's and Mike's comment. I think they're both saying the same thing, and from where I sit, both methods are effective. Marty's program that they have in is it the Roseville area? Roseburg area? Huh? Mid-Willamette area. As I get it, the callers and the dancers have cooperated to put on occasional dances where all the beginners come, and throughout the season, and they have a place then to get exposed to all the callers, and it's an additional reinforcement of their training and background. Is that correct? Well, interestingly enough, we have the same system in Northern California, and it's done privately. It's done, when I say privately, it's done without association sponsorship. We've been doing it for 20 to 25 years, and if you have not done this kind of thing, it is enormously effective. It is effective in that the way it works in our area is that starting with the September season, for September beginners, starting about mid-November, end of November, very early on in the season, the classes are all middle of the week. Come Friday and Saturday nights, and occasionally even I'm seeing some Sunday dances now, weekend dances, individual callers and sometimes clubs will sponsor open beginner dances. And throughout this, and every Saturday of the world through the season, there are a number of these dances that our beginners can attend, and the level of these dances is progressively moving along with their training cycles. There's going to be an occasional time, as this happens particularly in the latter end of the season, when someone calls a recycle, and there's a half dozen callers in town haven't called that yet, but that's also part of the training a little bit. In any event, it gives the dancers a very strong opportunity to participate in the activity in a very real situation. These are dances, not workshops that they go to. They're not class nights. They are dances, and they're actually being allowed to dance at the level that they are comfortable with. And whether it's done formally through an association or whether it's done privately, individually, the concept of having a place for the people to dance rather than to simply go and take lessons is very effective, and I would consider you think of that.
Okay, thank you, Bill. This gentleman, then we're going to go back to comment here. Okay. All right, now let me see if I can repeat some of the things you said. First of all, you say that you are aware of this type of thing going on in Oregon and approve of it, but you would like to know how we are going to bring in classes that have just graduated into mainstream and graduating them in less than 40 weeks. If you have an advertised level, yes. Okay. I'm going to defer that. And can you remember your question, or is it a real quick one? All right, go ahead.
Jim mentioned one of the things in there was the length of time in class, and he said possibly take a vote of what we're doing now. Could we just, before you listen further, get a poll of what we do?
Okay.
How many people go 20 weeks, 30 weeks,
That'll be interesting, and I think I can almost tell you. We're going to defer you just a second then, Hal. This is something that I knew was coming. In fact, I've already got it on the list here, something we had to mention. His question was, how many of you are teaching, no, don't vote yet, 20 weeks, 25 weeks, 30 weeks, 40 weeks, and so forth and so on, so we can get a consensus of what percentage it is. So let us, first of all, say how many of you are, I will preface this by saying I know most of you would like to teach the 40 weeks or a year. However, you're being forced by the clubs usually to teach according to their wishes. So how many of you are teaching, graduating them in about 20 weeks, roughly? Mainstream. Okay? Nobody? Everybody's going longer than 20 weeks. Okay? How many would say 25 weeks? Well, we're getting about 5 or 6 hands out there now. Okay? 25, 26 in there, yeah. How many would say 30? 30. Now, there's a good bunch. That's about half of our crowd. How many go 40? We have about 5, 6, 7 hands. That's more than I expected. All right. How many of you have been able to take them for a full year, a full season, I should say? 2 of you. Counting workshops, yes. All right. Just quick ones. One more poll. All right. How many of you that are teaching 30 or more weeks are in a rural area? A pretty good percentage. How many how many of you are in an urban area? I mean, a metropolitan area. Well, that's more of them in the metropolitan areas are able to do so than in the rural areas. Okay, what was your question first? Aren't all of you teaching approximately 2 hours for classes? Yes. Yes, 2 to 2.5. Yes, yeah, 2 to 2.5. We could go into a full discussion on that also, because there are a lot of people say that after 2 hours the benefit is lost. How many of you, let me just, my own thought right here, how many of you, when you are teaching, say the last 15 minutes or half hour, will concentrate on doing things that are easier, or maybe even singing calls and stuff to relax them toward the end? It's very good. Very good. Most of you. Okay, I'd like to, but we want questions, and we want lots of them. The more the merrier. But I'd like to have Hal take his second topic first, which isn't that long anyway, and then we'll have our questions again after that. Stick around, because we're going to get to some good subjects. I can see that.
The only experience that I've had with the Callers organization was back in 1955. A couple of other callers and myself decided that we should break away from the folk dance group that we'd been attending meetings for maybe 3 or 4 times. We had gone to their meetings, and they had suggested that we attend those, and we found very little of interest to ourselves in that folk dancing. Although back then, folk dancing and square dancing were hand in glove. And so anyway, to make a long story short, we got some other callers together, and we formed the SDLBA, Square Dance Leaders of the Baltimore Area, and we incorporated it. And at first it was a group of just callers and a delegate from each club. And then we made it so that other dancers could also come in and attend the meetings if they'd like, and it grew a little bit, and we were able to develop a program for putting on some benefits, the Heart Fund Dance, March of Dimes Dance, and things of that nature, which helped to publicize the square dancing in the area. We found that we were doing things a little differently than they were in the Washington area. There was an organization over there, still is, a fine organization called NCASLA, and they take in the part of Maryland that's suburban to Washington, D.C. They were touching hands when they did a right and left through. This was unthinkable in Baltimore. You didn't touch hands when you did a right and left through, because Baltimore square dancing was based on the old contras, which were so popular along the East Coast. And in the contra, even today, I guess, where they do it correctly, they don't touch hands as they do the right and left through. To make a long story short, that was one of our ideas, was to make our dancing uniform throughout the area at least. And we worked together and created a little, in 1958 and 59, a little glossary of square dance terms, and printed it up and put it on the market at 35 cents a shot. And we did a lot of other things. We provided 2 caller schools to create new callers. Deco Deck was one of the teachers one year. Ed Jenkins was one. And the callers, the prospective callers, of course, paid the way, but we made the arrangements and put on a little dance afterward and had them strut their stuff. And we held camporees beginning in 1956. Over the Labor Day weekend, we would have the dancers come out to this fresh air camp, which had about 10 little cabins, and a recreation hall and a mess hall, where we would put on a dance beginning Friday night, and then we'd have snacks after the dance, and we'd all go to sleep in the cabins, men on one side of the compound, women on the other, and had a lot of fun. So that went on until Sunday afternoon. That was carried on for about 16 years, and it created a warm feeling between not only a lot of callers, but a lot of dancers and callers and so on. And it's something that I surely recommend if you can get a group to go out together and spend a weekend every now and then. It's an experience that's really well worthwhile and does create cooperation. That was a very low-cost affair. I was looking at my notes last night. We have a little history. And the first one was at Black Rock Camp, and I think the price was $6.50 per person for the weekend. That included your dancing and your breakfast on Saturday morning, your snacks Friday night, and lunch and dinner on Saturday as well, and a big breakfast on Sunday morning. And noon we had the big farewell dinner, and after that we danced just another 2 hours until 2 o'clock. A viable organization, Square Dance Leaders of the Baltimore area, and we stick together, and we often feel that If the caller next to us takes a job away from us, we feel almost as good as though we had taken it away from him, because it's going to work that way every now and then. State of mind is an awful lot. You can get yourself awfully jealous in this business, you know it, and it can gnaw at your guts. But just make friends with your fellow man and know that he has the same problems you do. And as far as teaching is concerned, I think it's great that we all teach the same way. If they decide that they want to do it some other way when they get out into the world, why, that's too bad. But they're still squared answers, and we ought to accept them. From the SDLBA, there was an organization created because the dancers themselves began to get a little bored with what the callers were talking about at the meetings, and we helped them create another organization. That's called Mason-Dixon Square Dance Federation, and that is an organization of clubs. There are 57 clubs in the Baltimore area. The Baltimore area goes from York, Pennsylvania, down through southern Maryland, and east or west about as far as Laurel, Maryland, if you're familiar with that area, and then east as far as Delaware. So I'd say in that area there are about 2 million potential dancers. We only have about 3,600, so there's plenty of room to enlarge there. Our callers, there's 34 of them now members, and as I said before, that's practically all of them, because they do have a lot of advantages. We have an insurance policy that I don't know how we ever got it. But we pay $57 a year for the thing now. It's about 15 years old. It gives us $1 million on property damage and $25,000 on personal liability. It's with Aetna Life, written by a broker there in Maryland. So every caller is covered with that belongs to the organization. He has a chance to, well, he gets, our association is an affiliate of the CALLERLAB, so he gets all the information on CALLERLAB. Many of our members are direct members of CALLERLAB. We have this weekly dance one Saturday. It begins generally in October. One Saturday it's on this side of town, next Saturday it's over on this side of town. And the people going to class pay to attend that dance, and they go to one or the other generally, at least about 70% of them, so that they actually, when they sign up for 10 lessons, they're actually going to attend probably about 15. And repetition being a major part of learning the square dance, they do get that extra practice on those Saturday nights. Now, I think I've talked long enough, and I'm holding you back from taking questions and whatnot, so I'll step down, and here's Harold again. I call him George every now and then because he used to call me Harold.
Thank you, Hal. He brought up a couple things I'd like to have you just see if you have any comments on. The interesting thing was the delegate from each club in the area to the Callers Association meetings. Do any of you have anything like that in your area? Do you? 2, 3, 4 of you do. How's it work? Works out very well. Sounds like a good idea to me. And in our particular area, I don't think that's ever the case. Another thing that you no longer have it. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Oh, since they switched over to the other one, I see, since they have their own organization. Might have been a good idea to keep them coming anyway. A representative. I see, from the organization. Okay, then the other thing was the fact that he brought out about the callers' organizations getting together and doing these things together promoted the good fellowship, because how much jealousy there is among callers, as we all are aware of, especially when you don't see each other. But once you get together and get to know each other, you find out why Old George wasn't such a bad fellow after all. You know, and that is, to me, one of the main things for CALLERLAB, is to get all of these people together and realize that everybody has the same problems and the same solutions and so forth and so on. But are there any comments or questions on the callers' cooperation in the organizations? Have one back here. Just a comment. I'd like to repeat what you just said there on this tape. He says that he feels that 90% of the friction between callers is caused by dancers. I can concur. Yes. It works. Yes, I put this on the tape. His comment is that he notes that dancers have a habit of playing one caller against another by making comments. This caller said that, and I've had this personal experience. I know you're right. They had a tremendous argument going between me and another caller in Nebraska that neither one of us got in on, really. Honest, and they had us both feeling, well, what did we ever do, you know? And finally, we would run into him at one of the state festivals, and I just made a point of walking over and shaking hands with him and said, "Hey, I don't know what this is all about, but I'm not mad at you." He said, "I'm not mad at you either," and that kind of took care of that. But this is the kind of thing that CALLERLAB has accomplished by just getting the callers together. Okay, we had a hand up here. Okay.
One thing I want to talk about was how that program we ran with the new dancers, we ran several different.
Yeah, you want to come up here on the microphone? Since you're right here anyway.
This won't take long, though. We had the program run by a different chairman every year. So as a result, you got a different kind of feeling with the organization. We had callers selected for the new dancer program by putting their names on a list and randomly selecting numbers. We had callers selected on the program by the good old boy system. And we had callers selected on the program by one person who stood back and said, maybe I ought to try to get the dancer to have the best caller earliest on. That beneficial pontiff got us 25 to 30 squares in our dances for the new dancers. The random number selection got us a mess. We had 3 squares in Maryland, 10 squares in Virginia. So part of that was that we had a dictator that did a good job for us. The whole program was based on how good the first 4 or 5 callers were in that particular year. That's all I wanted to say.
This is a very apt thing, a dictator that made a success of things. I prefer it. I used to say that too, but don't we usually call them now monarchs? You know, they just happen to be the king, the beneficial pontiff. Say, all right. You're all welcome to come up here, and I urge you to come up here if you will. Because if somebody buys a tape and he hears a lot of silent spots, they're not going to appreciate it.
I think this is what happens when you allow the callers themselves to put on the dances themselves. Then who makes the determination of whether that's the best one to go to is if they wish to dance to that caller. By you selecting a group to call for that, for a particular dance, or you have dancers, an organization select them, then you don't have it. By having the dancers determine who it's going to be, you'll know whether they want to go to dance to you or not, and then you end up with large groups for the ones that want to put on the dances. And it becomes the proper selection. It's the dancer who selects them.
All right, there's another viewpoint. You were just up here. Just comment? during the year, every caller.
I see. The only difference was that the order of
Appearance was each caller in the association did get his turn. Okay, that had a class. Okay, I want to know which one of you gentlemen first. Would you like to come up? Would you like to come up here?
I'm Ivan Korn from Eugene, Oregon, and we're just south of Salem, where Marty just commented on his programs. And we run the same program, but we do have the clubs host the new dancers' dances. So each club that's involved in this program gets to host a dance. So they have it at their own clubs, and this has been very successful with our group. And our Callers Association gets along very well. We control the basics that it calls. We program them ahead of time. So this has been successful with us.
All right, thank you. We'll get one or two more comments, then we'll have Jim give his talk. I think you were next. You might as well come on up here if you want.
Hi, I'm Jack Brown from Grants Pass, Oregon. We basically do the same thing that Marty and these guys are talking about, but it seems the big question is, who does the scheduling of what? Now, we have a council. We let the council set up the schedule of the dances for the club. The club caller of that club calls that dance. There's a new dancers dance every weekend after the middle of December. The callers handle the level. We progress the level every 30 days at our callers meeting. We don't go any further than the lowest class in the council. Thank you.
All right, thank you. One more.
My name is Bob Wilson, Waukegan, Illinois. Along with three or four callers in our area, we were instrumental in starting our Federation of Lake County Area Callers. It's about 45 miles north of Chicago. We're having a problem communicating with our Square Dance Association in the area. I had a question, really. Is this cooperation between callers, or is this cooperation between association and caller, or cooperation between dancers and callers?
Well, for my part, we're all one, so it would be any and all forms of cooperation that we can get.
Well, I find a great problem communicating between the association and the Callers Association, the Square Dance Association, Two Callers Association. I was president of the Association of Callers there for 3 years. In that 3-year period, I was never able to break the ice between the two associations. They go outside and bring in traveling callers for their association dances. We finally did get area callers, which was not necessarily our association callers, to call some of their dances, but they would rather pay $600 to bring in a traveling caller than to have some very adequate callers from our association call their dances and save them money. And we've never been able to break the ice between them.
All right, we have I appreciate the problem, and I understand what you're up against. However, there's the old maxim, and I don't know whether this applies in your case or not, but it's cheaper many times to hire a caller that costs you $100 if he brings in $200 than it is to hire a $10 caller if he only brings in $9. And I'm not saying that's the case there, but this is the premise that many of these organizations work on, and if you can prove them wrong, then you will probably be in solid. In other words, you've got to prove to them that you can fill the bill for them. And I don't know how you're going to do that until you get to talk to them and get a chance. Just a second. Can you both hold your questions, because I'd like to have Jim give he's got a short talk he'd like to give, and then we were going to open up for the whole bunch to shoot the works for anything you want to talk about.
Well, I don't even have any notes for this thing. It's very short because I want to get some ideas from somebody else on this. The other subject that I had was caller cooperation for new dancer hoedowns, I believe it was. This is really it. And, like Ivan was talking and Marty about their programs down in the Oregon area, I think this is really tremendous. Now, I know personally up in the Seattle area, we have a problem with a lot of the new dancer dances, at the caller meetings, our callers do get together. And for instance, if we're going to have, we used to call them 10-week dances. Now we're getting the clubs to use the Caller Lab of Basics 1 through 38 for the dance. But still, then we have dancers coming back from other dances saying, you know, hey, what's, I mean, I'm not exaggerating, what's partner hinge or, you know, spin chain through at a 1 through 38 dance. And I'd like to know, it sounds, Ivan, like you don't have any problem like that at all in your area. And I'd like to get some ideas on how to work in a callers organization to really get everybody, because it's one thing to sit at a meeting and say, okay, we're all going to not call past 1 through 38, but then when the actual dances happen, then we find callers going up and down, and I think this really rattles a lot of the new dancers, because then they feel inadequate. So what they do, then they come back to you, you're their teacher, and they say, well, hey, you said we could go to this 10-level dance, but boy, we couldn't do this and this and this. And I think this is important. This is really what we're all trying to get ideas for, is how to get everybody to do everything, at least so we can keep the thing going pretty well in the same ideas. So if anybody else has any, that's it, because I really want some ideas myself on this.
All right, thank you. Open up some ideas I need to talk about anyway. The hand back here. Come on up front. Anybody that is going to talk, I wish you would come up and talk on the microphone.
For this gentleman down here, I wish I could say I'm from Peoples Creek, Iowa, but I'm not. Seattle, Washington. Marv K. I've discussed this with Jim when he was preparing his items for up here, and he had mentioned some of the things he was going to do, and it got me to thinking. Somewhere along the way, that I think there's something wrong. For example, the little poll we took a little while ago, I just counted, there's approximately 40 callers, or 40, I should say gentlemen. I don't know how many of the ladies are. I just counted gentlemen. I shouldn't do that. But there's probably around 40 callers sitting in this room. There were approximately 5 hands that went up when they said, who teaches 40 weeks? Now, that either means that there are 90% of the callers in here who are wrong because we're not doing it the way Caller Lab says it should be done at 40, or possibly, just possibly, something might be wrong with Caller Lab's estimate of 40 weeks. 40 weeks, they're saying, is an optimum. In other words, this would be if we had the perfect conditions and the perfect way to teach, 40 weeks, or 41, I believe it is, 41 should be the way it should be done. But let's face it, we're not dealing with the pie in the sky type of thing out there when we're doing the calling and the teaching. I think what we need Caller Lab to do is to, instead of saying this is the way things should go and should be if everything is peachy keen, I think we need to establish some very basic, in other words, a minimum somewhere along the way, and not set it at 30 weeks. Or not at 41, because it's not selling. 41 isn't selling. I can't sell it to my clubs, even though I would like to do it for 41. I think I'd have a lot better dancers. The problem comes in the clubs, and especially for those of you folks who use angels. Those angels don't want to come out and dance for 41 weeks and come out and help you to take your class through. In fact, if you can get them out for 20, you're doing darn good. Most of our angels come out for about the first 10. And then we don't see any more angels except for maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of the diehards who really are with the club or club officers. Now, I think one of the problems that we get into, and Jim mentioned this also, was when we have we'll advertise in our area, 10-week lesson level dance. Well, in Washington, we have approximately 121 callers who are federated, who are in the list of federated callers. Of that, 21 are Caller Lab members. We have over 100 callers sitting out there who do not belong to Caller Lab, don't subscribe to its
methods, don't subscribe to his teaching, and they are still teaching many of them. I know of one caller that put them out in 9 weeks. He put out a class and said that they were capable of dancing. I know another one that puts them out in 15. Most of the callers who do not belong to Caller Lab are doing it in approximately 20 weeks. It's 20 weeks is still the major graduation time in the state of Washington. Now, when we say we're going to hold a 10-lesson level dance, we advertise it. It depends on whether a guy's a Caller Lab member and he's going on the 30-week. So maybe at the 10-week level, he's gone through one, or maybe at the 40-week, he's 1/4 of the way through his list. Another guy's teaching on the 30-week class. So he's 1/3 of the way through his list. Another guy, he's on the 20-week method, so he's halfway through. So we have 3 or 4 callers who come up to call this new dancer's dance, and the guy who's the 20-week man gets up there and he calls right straight on through, circulates and folds and runs and everything else. And you're the poor one guy that's a Caller Lab man trying to do it at 40 weeks. His dancers get bombed. I think what we need to do here is to very seriously consider well, if you want to call it a minimum time, and set it where we are now. I think most of us are at 30 weeks or 25 weeks, somewhere in there. Let's give them a limit or some place where we can sell the other callers in our area something to shoot at. If you try to go back and tell your callers you're going to have to go 40 weeks because Caller Lab says it, they're going to tell us just what they have told us so far, take it and jam it.
Okay, before we have any more, I would like to have you discuss a couple of things he said. Bill, you'll be next because you had your hand up a little while ago. But first of all, I want to ask you all, how many of you use angels in your classes? All right, how many of you find there are more angels at the early part of the class than there is at the last part? How many? All right, how many of you find that there are more angels toward the end of your classes? Okay, I'm in your last group here. All right, how many would rather not have them there at all? Well, I used to be with you, but I'm dead set against it anymore. There are 2 reasons. One is that the new dancers have the confidence if there's someone in the right place. The angels can help you with that. The second thing is if they're going into the club, if those angels are there, they are halfway home by the time they graduate because they are acquainted. They feel like they're part of the family. Whereas when we used to take them in with no angels, they were all strangers. The most successful things I've seen are where the more angels, the better. Of course, the angels have to learn to shut up. Okay, now, Bill, you had a comment.
That was the best thing I said all day, huh? Oh, mine do pretty well.
Shut up. All right. Marv, can I ask you a question? What would you say right now would be the average level in the Seattle area? How high? Where are they? Is it? No, that's a very valid, and I would agree. I know the area, and that's a very good assessment. How long does it take? How long would it take? What you're saying is most of the dancers in your area are mainstream QS and a half. How long would it take them to get there? How long would it take you to teach a .0 dancer to get to that particular spot? At least a year. May I then urge the Seattle area and anyone else who's interested to do a class that lasts 1 year? Because the reality is, if you have a .0 dancer here, and the average dancer in your area here is that mainstream QS and a half, somewhere along the line, he got that training. He made the training. We have trained them to this point. Now, the thing we're complaining about is we're giving them a diploma too soon. But the point is we give them a diploma here, but the training keeps on. And it keeps on in the worst possible way when we tell them that they're experienced dancers or that they're veteran dancers, and they're not. And my position is, I think if we would spend some adrenaline, some energy, in trying to figure out how can we legitimately lengthen the classes, we'd be a lot better off, because they get the training one way or another. They get it. In my area, we have a soft +2 as the average area, and our classes now are not quite a year, but almost. We have, in most cases, about 9 months, and we're going, more and more guys are going to a full 1-year class. And we used to say the same thing over and over again. You can't do it. You can't lengthen the classes. And what happens? If you put your mind to it, if you're properly motivated, you make it happen. Ask a question. On the microphone.
This is directed to you. Don't walk away. I want to know if all these callers in your area run their programs or they work for contracted clubs, and they've been able to, as we've been discussing, they've been able to talk the clubs into going a full year program.
The answer to your question is yes.
Guess what? Super salesman.
What I mean by that is it goes both ways. And Mike, am I correct? Mike's in my area. It goes both ways. We have some clubs who run classes. They're not contract. Well, yeah, they're contracted caller by every definition of the word. The club caller runs this class for the club, and well, you know, you're in the area too. They do the same thing, and they run the club. They run the class under the club's direction, in a hired help type situation. We also have callers who run their own. The average class is about 9 months, and more are extending more and more. And we have a reasonably decent level in our area. What I would say is, if we would put some energy into thinking about how can we do it, that's not an insurmountable problem. That is a very valid problem, and it can be done. And I would urge you to think that way.
Yeah, we got to take these guys and got to take these gentlemen in order, and this gentleman has been waiting. So, and we only have about 10 minutes to go.
Tom Perry, and it's a long way from Louisiana to Oregon. I run my classes for a year. We're in a rural area, and I have some things which are advantages and some which are disadvantages. One of the advantages is that I'm able to run my own class and run my own thing. Clubs don't have to worry about that. The thing that I keep hearing here over and over is, why can't we run our classes longer? It's because the clubs won't allow us to. I don't have that problem, so I've run mine longer, and I'm very, very happy with it and very, very successful. As Bill was talking about, we have a soft +1 area, and I made up my mind I'm not going to turn my dancers loose on an open floor that they can't dance. So I said, they don't know any different. I'm not going to give them a diploma until they're at soft +1. And that's what I did, and it's been very, very successful. The point I want to bring out, and Jim had it there a while ago, was maybe we're spending a lot of time trying to teach and trying to convince the wrong people. The dancers wield an awful lot of power. Maybe we as CALLERLAB members should be training the dancers and let them get to the callers that are not members.
My own personal observation is that the advantage he has is running it as a caller is the advantage is for the dancers, but not to him. More than likely, some years he runs pretty slim pickings on his pay. I think I speak for most of you callers. If you're teaching for a class, for a club, I'm saying, they want you to graduate in about 22, 3 nights. Okay, have any of you ever thought of doing this? And I have done this very successfully. At the end of the time the club will run the class, they want to graduate them. They go ahead and graduate them, but what I do is go rent a hall and put on workshops for all the classes in the area. I may make, I may lose, but I would offer that as a suggestion to some of you fellows, and many times you make more than you do calling for the club. Yeah, right. So consider that. Now, I believe that gentleman there was next, but you'll have to come up here unless it's very short. Very short. Yeah, the 41 nights suggestion was determined at CALLERLAB convention like we are at right now, when they got together talking how long will it take to teach this and how long to teach that, and the consensus of opinion was that it took 41 weeks or equivalent to teach it, and that's where it was derived. Now, who was next here? I think there it is. Come on up. We have about 7 minutes, folks.
I'm from Vancouver, Canada, and the way our club operates is we run for 2 years. We have a beginner's class that starts on Wednesdays, and then the next year they're the second year level on Wednesday, and then they go into our regular club. And the whole idea of our club is that square dancing is a recreation and it's for fun, and we don't want our dancers to feel pressured, especially after coming off of work or something like that. And so that's the way we work it.
Very good. I sort of envy you. By the way, I want to make one remark, though. I don't know how many of you would fit in on this also. But don't you find that your class members would love to go on an extra 10, 15 nights? Mine hate to see the classes end. They just dread it because they're having so much fun. Yeah. Okay. Well, just quickly. All right, Walt. Regress or review. Okay. Right. The workshop idea is really a successful thing. We had another hand over here.
I'd like to go in reference to what Mark had to say. You said you had a problem earlier about new dancers going into the dance and getting blown off the floor with something in the fall and exposed to. First of all, I'd like to say this. We learned a number of years ago, 4 years ago, that CALLERLAB has one of the finest tools available to all callers. That's that CALLERLAB program.
That list.
Our Callers Association voted to adopt that as a format for all of our callers in our association. So whether they belong to CALLERLAB or not, they're working within the CALLERLAB program because it is part of our association. And we found it to be very successful in informing our new dancers. They get one of these CALLERLAB programs the day they come to class. And they are not afraid to, when they go to the dancer's dance, and it says, not 10 lesson levels, but say 1 through 38.
Yes.
They walk up to that caller and say, I haven't learned this yet, and that class says this is only 1 through 38. Would you please walk us through that?
Right. Yes, that was the best idea. When I was going to say that a little while ago. You shouldn't say it's a 10-week level, but it's level 30 or through level 38 or 40. Just a minute. Jim, did you have something? Hal, did you have anything more?
Yeah, just real quick. On to what Marty's saying. Now, I do this with my dancers, and I think this idea of getting to the other callers that aren't members through the dancers by keeping the dancers informed about what the levels are is really the secret. If we're getting anything out of this, I really do. Because if the dancers, I do this with my new dancers during class. I take an evening to sit down at break time and explain what the All CALLERLAB's about, what festival dances are, what the whole thing, so they were really educated. And like Marty said, they've got that list, and boy, if you go off the list, if the dancers do it, they're going to keep the callers in line. I think that's a good deal, Marty.
This might take too long. I was wondering how many of you had used the basic square dance course, 38 lessons, or 38 figures, rather, in 29 lessons. Have you tried that at all? 38. In 29 lessons. We tried it, some of us, this year, and used the progress chart for the beginner dancers based on that. And some of the dancers thought that it was just too slow. They were getting a little bored. And now it seems as though the consensus of the members of the Square Dance Leaders of Baltimore area say that it's just too easy a course, and they're going to mainstream. And what we're doing is doing it in 30 sessions, plus these Saturday night dances where they get practice, and then having a workshop during the summer in air-conditioned places where we have them. And I have 2 classes that'll be workshopping right along, even after they've graduated. The workshop is really designed for those people that are graduating in May and coming into the club, and then they're going to keep workshopping. The other people are going to probably level off during the summer, dance occasionally. Take too much time. Bye. Nice being with you. Thank you.
I'd like to have you help me thank my 2 cohorts here, Jim Davis and Hal Tray. And my name again, in case you didn't get it, Jim said, is Harold Bausch. I'm from Nebraska, so that's, where's my man? But I leave you with one thought. On all of your classes, when you go home and start teaching again, one thought, and that is this: keep them fun. Don't worry about the level as much as the fun. Because as long as they're having a good time,